Who owns an AI campus when its customer can't carry the financing alone? Nvidia will backstop up to $105 billion for OpenAI's new Ohio site. The chip supplier is now guaranteeing the debt that lets its biggest customer keep buying chips. Here's the claim I'll stand behind. Nobody can truly own this build-out because the attempt already requires suppliers, lenders, power companies, and the public grid to all carry it together. That's today's lead. Also in today's episode, rare books tracked to a scanning warehouse, unchecked AI text reaching powerful institutions, a grid racing a historic load, and bacteria learning to compute. Come with me, let's get into it. Anyone carrying the debt behind OpenAI's Ohio campus is betting that the future demand for intelligence will cover infrastructure built years before the revenue actually arrives. So who's actually carrying it? Nvidia agreed Monday to backstop up to $105 billion in financing for the Ports Pike campus in Pike County. A backstop is a guarantee. If the financing needs support, then Nvidia will stand up behind it. That creates an extraordinary loop. Nvidia sells OpenAI the chips. OpenAI needs financing to keep buying them. Now Nvidia is helping guarantee that financing. The project starts with plans for more than 4 gigawatts of AI factory capacity and includes an option to nearly double. SB Energy will build and manage it under a 20-year OpenAI lease. Nvidia is also investing $1.5 billion in SB Energy. The Wall Street Journal reported that early discussions considered a financing guarantee near $250 billion. That planned financing guarantee then fell below $120 billion, but even after that cut, OpenAI kept much of what remained off its own books through the financing structure. The debt is instead moving through leases, special financing companies, and supplier balance sheets. Those structures can spread risk across more parties. They can also make the operating company look less burdened than the system around it actually is. The answer then is that Nvidia bears a major share of the risk because OpenAI alone can't cover it. The financing resembles a chipmaker helping build the road to its own store and then also guaranteeing the traffic. OpenAI President Greg Brockman told Semaphore that compute is really becoming the new oil. Now that's a useful sales pitch for somebody racing to secure compute. It's less useful as an account of the financing actually underneath it. Oil producers don't usually need to guarantee $105 billion so that their largest buyer can keep purchasing oil. Here, the guarantee tells us something that the slogan doesn't. Concentration has become too heavy for any one company to hold. And the strain is reaching beyond AI companies. Bloomberg reports that data center borrowing could put upward pressure on treasury yields as construction pulls in capital. European monetary authorities have also flagged the risk of a correction built around this concentration. Now, OpenAI says the campus will support 35,000 construction jobs through 2032 and 2,500 permanent positions. SoftBank and SB Energy have committed to developing about 10 gigawatts of new generation in the region and more than $4 billion in regional grid investment. The first phase is planned for 2028. Now, that's substantial physical capacity, jobs, and electricity infrastructure. It also means people far beyond OpenAI and Nvidia have a stake in whether the financing actually works. Now, the most interesting part of all this is what the structure accidentally admits. Compute cannot stay under one company's control if building it requires many companies and investors and workers and utilities and public infrastructure. The ownership papers may stay concentrated, but the capacity they finance keeps spreading into a much larger world. All right, that expanding appetite reaches all the way to individual books, and sellers of rare titles are watching irreplaceable objects disappear into the training data supply chain. One bookseller slipped an Apple AirTag inside a volume from a bulk order of roughly 1,000 rare and out-of-print books. According to 404 Media, the tracker traveled from California through Wisconsin and Colorado, and it ended up at an Amazon warehouse complex outside Las Vegas. So what happened to the books once they arrived? You might have heard of this before. They weren't shelved or resold or anything like that. 404 Media reports that the workers cut off the bindings, separated the pages, ran them through high-speed scanners, and then discarded the physical copies. The destination even carries a grim little visual joke. The logo at one of the facilities shows a Tyrannosaurus Rex holding a book. Booksellers across the UK and Ireland had already seen unusual book orders and suspected AI companies. The AirTag gave that suspicion a route and a destination. Anthropic ran a similar large-scale effort called Project Panama, though Anthropic and XAI have said that they don't specifically buy rare or antique books. Amazon told TechCrunch, Amazon purchases books through commercial channels to help develop and improve the products and services our customers use. The company did not dispute that the books were indeed destroyed. Why pay for old paper and then throw the paper away? Because the valuable part to the buyer in this case is human-written text printed before late 2022. Because since then, the open web, as you know, has filled with more machine-generated writing. If models repeatedly train on the output of earlier models, quality can decay. Researchers call that model collapse. A pre-generative book is therefore a sealed sample from an earlier information environment. It's clean human text with a physical date attached. Now, that does explain the demand. It does not excuse destroying rare objects. Each copy has its own history, its marks, binding, and path through human hands. Once workers cut it apart, no digital file can restore that object. One bookseller described the buyers as people who just want the content as a bunch of words strung together. And that gets directly at the loss here. A scan preserves the words, yes, but it also strips away everything that made that particular copy of those words unique. And yet, the economics do contain their own undoing. A rare physical book can belong to one person at a time. Once its text becomes a file, 1 billion people can read the same sentence without ever using it up. So the destruction part does deserve grief, but let's look at the other side here. Because of it, people may no longer need to find, buy, and guard the last surviving copy of something just to reach old human knowledge. The challenge then is finding a way to preserve the objects while also letting the words travel. All right, now those scanned books are valuable because people wrote them, while 3 institutions just learned how little fluent-sounding writing tells us about who actually checked the work. In Houston, an expert witness hired by 3M at $475 an hour submitted a report in litigation over the 2020 Watson grinding explosion. The blast killed 3 people and damaged about 200 homes. The witnesses used ChatGPT to generate roughly 85 to 90% of the report. One prompt asked it to show how 3M is 0% at fault. So what exactly did the expert contribute? ChatGPT followed the instruction. It then graded its own work, 97 or so out of 100. Even the model, though, warned that saying 3M was 0% responsible created an easy target. Now, a paid human was still actually credited with reviewing the fatal explosion case in the report. The jury ultimately awarded more than $61 million and did assign 3M 30% of the blame. Now, the same failure appeared in a different form in Australia. A government-commissioned trial of age checks online cost nearly $3.5 million. It helped inform implementation of a national social media ban for children under 16. The document included roughly 6 references that reviewers could not verify. The contractor was the Age Check Certification Scheme, and they admitted using ChatGPT to rewrite sections after fabrication references turned up in the document's metadata. Deloitte previously had to refund $440,000 over similar invented sourcing. And then there's Washington. The House Office of Legislative Counsel turns lawmakers' ideas into the exact language of bills. That office says it's swamped by AI-generated drafts that sound fluent, but then fall apart when professional drafters actually check them. The shared failure then sits with the human checkpoint. AI made drafting almost instant, but institutions kept treating a smooth document as evidence that someone had done the underlying work. That assumption is no longer safe. A fluent draft now resembles a beautifully labeled box. You still have to open it and check what is inside. Who wrote the sentences matters less than whether someone actually checked the facts, followed the citations, and took responsibility. Now, every case here was eventually caught. Opposing counsel challenged the courtroom report. A metadata check exposed the Australian citations. Legislative drafters found the errors in submitted bills. Detection is running behind production, yet it is running. Those people are building the new checkpoint through repeated use. The authority increasingly belongs to the person who can show the checking rather than the person who submits the smoothest prose. All right, checking a document takes people, but powering this build-out takes years of physical work, and families on already strained grids need to know who pays when these new loads arrive. Jim Robb is the chief executive of North America's grid reliability watchdog, and he said that demand is growing at a record-setting pace. He estimated a need for roughly 200 gigawatts of new capacity over 5 to 7 years. In his words, that could power San Francisco 200 times over. So can the grid add that much without shifting the cost and reliability burden onto everyone already connected? West Texas shows why the answer to that question still remains unsettled. Woody Rickerson, chief operating officer of the Texas grid operator, warned on Monday that without new transmission, the Permian Basin could face rolling blackouts within 5 years. He said a statewide $33 billion transmission expansion must move faster than the current backlog of projects waiting to connect. Now, we should take that immediate warning seriously. A single large campus can concentrate demand in a place where the wires simply weren't built for it. Now, aggregate AI power use and local grid strain are different questions. A regional share can look manageable while one town or transmission corridor absorbs the actual shock. California is beginning to turn that concern into specific terms. One bill would require data centers above 25 megawatts to cover their own grid costs. They would also have to cut demand when the system is under stress. And another bill offers faster review to facilities that reach 100% carbon-free operation within 5 years and provide their own zero-carbon backup. That's more useful than treating every data center as equally harmful. It tells builders, you carry the load you create, you build clean, and then you can move faster. A June poll commissioned by Net Zero California found that about 70% of Californian voters oppose new data centers in their own communities. Now, some of that comes from legitimate concern about bills and power, land, and local control. A blanket rejection can also push construction toward communities with less power to resist. The fair rule has to travel with the project. Consumer advocates at the Utility Reform Network remain skeptical of utility promises that the build-out will actually lower bills. And recent events justify that scrutiny. Yesterday's edition of the Century Report covered a reconstruction that estimated errors in a regional capacity model overcharged ratepayers by about $12 billion. Now, federal regulators are also working across regional boundaries. They approved a plan to spread the cost of roughly $10 billion in new transmission lines across neighboring electricity markets. That recognizes a physical truth. Power crosses borders that billing systems are treating as walls. Much of the near-term generation now answering this demand is new gas, and that undercuts any easy claim that AI load automatically cleans the grid. Still, the scale of demand is forcing work that old planning cycles delayed. More transmission, faster connection, clearer cost rules, stronger demands that large users help keep the grid stable. AI infrastructure, of course, should not get a free ride. If states make builders carry their costs and reward clean supply, then this historic load can accelerate the grid that people already needed. All right, once the wires reach the campus, computation may no longer stay inside conventional chips because MIT engineers have built working circuits from colonies of living bacteria. A team at MIT engineered Pantoia agglomerans, a common bacterium, to act as a transistor. Now, a transistor is a tiny switch inside a circuit. It either lets a signal pass or it blocks it, and those connected switches are what form the logic beneath computing. So how do you turn a colony into one of those switches? The bacteria respond to a small signaling molecule. One strain changes state, detects a target, and releases another molecule as its output. Nearby colonies receive that output and then pass the signal onward. The researchers printed colonies about 5 millimeters apart on agar, which is the gel used in a petri dish. Signals moved across the gaps in one direction, colony to colony. So picture a circuit board that grows its own traces. Instead of electrons racing through an etched silicon, chemical messages move through living islands. The team built 5 strains that work together. With them, the researchers demonstrated several different kinds of logic, signal routing, and addition. Their largest working circuit was a 2-input adder spread across 24 colonies. Each calculation takes about 8 hours. Now that sounds absurd beside a phone chip until you ask where this circuit is meant to live. Silicon obviously wins on speed, but silicon can't grow across a leaf and repair itself or reproduce. Senior author Christopher Voigt said that given enough colonies and time, these circuits could someday do anything that an iPhone can do. Now, the working demonstration sits far short of that sweeping comparison. 24 colonies doing slow addition is an early construction set, but the pieces do actually connect, and that is the key result. Small biological switches can combine into larger circuits. The team imagines painting one onto a plant's leaves and roots. It could then detect the chemical signs of drought or a pest and then manufacture a fungicide where the plant needs it. The sensor, controller, and factory would live in one self-repairing package. DARPA and IARPA helped fund the work, which points to the interest in distributed biological sensing. The paper appeared in Nature Chemical Biology. The marvel here is the location. Computation can now, even though it's slow, grow in places where a rigid chip would never fit. A logic gate just needs something that can hold two states and pass a signal. Life has done that inside cells for billions of years, and we're beginning to wire those signals into circuits on our own. All right, so closing it out for today. So can anyone actually own this build-out? The contracts can assign ownership, of course. The companies can hold leases and debts and chips and warehouses, books, and land. But today's stories show how quickly control starts slipping past all of those boundaries. OpenAI's Ohio campus needs Nvidia to guarantee financing, an energy company to build it, lenders to fund it, workers to construct it, and a regional grid to power it. The effort to concentrate compute has produced a structure that distributes both capacity and risk. Amazon can buy a rare book and destroy the paper, but it still can't make a digitized sentence rivalrous. Once copied, the words can be shared endlessly without ever being used up. Institutions can accept polished AI writing under the name of a human expert, but they can't keep claiming that authority once opposing counsel, metadata checks, and professional drafters expose what nobody had previously verified. Proof is becoming more valuable than polish. Grid operators can warn about the scale of new demand. Communities and lawmakers are already answering with stronger demands of their own. Carry your own cost, help during strain, and earn faster approval by supplying clean power. And computation itself has started leaving the wafer. MIT's circuit takes 8 hours to add 2 inputs, but it grows, it repairs itself, and can someday live on a leaf. That's the deeper answer. Ownership works best when the thing being controlled stays scarce, fixed, and under someone's direct control. Intelligence doesn't behave that way. Neither do words once copied, electricity once networked, or living circuits once they can reproduce. The build-out starts with a small group of companies controlling the money and the machinery. Its useful output keeps becoming easier to share, easier to check, and possible in more forms. So the hopeful future still holds people accountable. In it, no company can convert temporary control over financing or infrastructure into permanent control over capability. Now, they can own the paper, but they can't own what the build-out teaches the world to do. See you tomorrow.